Walk into a forest, look up at the trees towering above you, and notice something strange. They're huge, they're heavy, they've been growing for decades or centuries. But look down at your feet. No holes, no gigantic pits where the tree dug out the ground to make room for itself. Just a carpet of leaves and a thin layer of soil. How can something that big just appear out of the ground without leaving a crater? Welcome to EDUx Talks. Today, we'll shrink ourselves down, dive into the invisible worlds of air, leaves, roots, and fungi, and answer a surprisingly tricky question. Why don't trees leave holes in the ground as they grow? Some trees are monsters of the living world. A giant sequoia or massive oak can weigh up to 2,000 tons, about the weight of 10 blue whales calmly stacked on top of each other. They can reach the height of a 25-story building, holding thousands of branches and millions of leaves in the air. Now imagine a building that tall. It needs massive foundations, deep piles, steel, concrete. If you dug those foundations, you'd see a giant hole in the ground. But a tree? We might picture the roots mirroring the ground, a huge underground tree as big as the one above, drilling deep into the earth. That image is wrong. Instead, the roots of most big trees are surprisingly shallow, a dense, tangled mat of roots, often packed mostly into the top 25 centimeters of soil, about the depth of your hand and wrist. Only a few thicker roots may reach deeper, but the bulk of the root system lives near the surface. It's like trying to hold up a skyscraper with a network of thick carpets instead of steel piles. So the paradox is this: how can a 2,000-ton wooden skyscraper be held up by a sheet of roots in the top 25 centimeters of dirt and not leave a massive hole where it took all that material from? To answer that, we need to realize something almost magical. Trees are mostly built out of thin air. If you've ever built a sandcastle, you know where the sand came from, the hole you dug. So where did the stuff of a tree come from? All that wood, bark, and leaves? Most people guess from the soil. But that's like saying a building is made from the hole it sits in. In reality, the main ingredient of a tree is carbon, and almost all of that carbon comes not from the ground, but from the sky. The air around you is mostly 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and only about 0.04% carbon dioxide, CO2. That tiny 0.04% is the buffet trees live on. Inside CO2 is carbon, the atom trees use to build their bodies. Trunks, branches, roots, leaves, most of their dry mass is made of carbon-based molecules. But because CO2 is so rare, trees face a gigantic challenge. To gain 1 ton of carbon, a tree must filter and process roughly 6,000 tons of air, which is about 5 million cubic meters of gas. And yet, somehow, they do it. Slowly, quietly, patiently. No bulldozers, no digging machines, just leaves. The crown of a tree, that green cloud of leaves, is more than just shade. It's a gigantic, multi-story industrial megacity. Each leaf is a tiny solar panel. Each leaf also doubles as a chemical factory, and millions of these are working in parallel every sunny day for decades. Now let's zoom in to a single leaf. On the underside of most leaves are thousands of microscopic pores called stomata, literally mouths. Imagine a field of tiny lips opening and closing non-stop. Through these mouths, the tree inhales CO2 from the air and vomits oxygen back out. And there's another job. Trees pull water up from the soil through their roots and into the leaves. But here's the twist. They waste almost all of it. Up to 95% of the water a tree drags up from the ground is not kept. It's sweated out through the stomata as water vapor in a process called transpiration. So this creates a constant invisible mist over the forest. From far away, the air looks empty, but at the microscopic level, a forest is a giant breathing humidifier, puffing out plumes of vapor all day long. These invisible clouds of moisture can rise, cool, and help seed real clouds, influencing local weather and even rainfall patterns. So when you stand in a forest and feel the air is damp, you're basically standing in the exhaled breath of trees. But what's the point of all this? To understand, we need to peek inside the leaf factories and see the machines at work. Inside the green parts of leaves are millions of tiny structures called chloroplasts, like microscopic solar reactors. Their job is simple yet almost godlike: turn sunlight, water, and air into sugar. The recipe? Sunlight hits chlorophyll, the green pigment in chloroplasts. This energy is used to split water molecules, H2O, pulled from the roots. Splitting water frees up electrons and hydrogen and releases oxygen as a waste product, the oxygen we breathe. The electrons and hydrogen are then used along with CO2 from the air to build glucose, a sugar with the formula C6H12O6. This glucose is more than plant food. It's a battery, storing the sun's energy in chemical bonds, and a building block, a Lego brick from which the tree can construct almost everything. By chaining sugar molecules into long fibers, trees make cellulose and lignin, the tough materials that make up wood, bark, and leaves. So, molecule by molecule, your average tree is quietly 3D printing itself out of sunlight and air. But you might notice a puzzle. If plants make oxygen from water and take in CO2, how do they use oxygen? Aren't they supposed to be the opposite of animals? Trees are not solar statues. They are living, metabolizing beings. Just like you, trees need energy 24/7 to grow new cells, to repair damage, to transport water and nutrients, to build defenses against pests and diseases. Making sugar is only step one. Step two is spending that sugar. All living cells, plant or animal, use a process called cellular respiration. They take in oxygen, they burn glucose in a controlled way, they release CO2, water, and energy. So trees also breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2, just like we do. They do this through leaves, which both photosynthesize and respire, bark, which has small pores and thin layers where gas can cross, and root tips, especially the fine roots in airy soil. During the day, photosynthesis is so powerful that trees take in more CO2 than they release. Net result, they store carbon and grow. At night, in the dark, photosynthesis stops, but respiration keeps going. The tree runs on the sugar it made during the day. Think of photosynthesis as charging a giant biomass battery and respiration as the slow, steady discharge needed to stay alive. Now we know where the tree's mass mostly comes from: air and sunlight turned into carbon-rich molecules. So if trees don't eat the soil to get big, what are the roots actually doing down there? The underground part of a tree is not a neatly mirrored version of the crown. Instead of a giant underground tree, we find a thick, intricate carpet of roots. mostly in the top 25 centimeters of soil, spreading out often far beyond the reach of the branches. It's like the tree is standing on a shallow but incredibly wide platform woven into the earth. Why so shallow? Because that's where most of the oxygen is. Roots need air too. Most of the water from rain and dew accumulates. Most of the nutrients from decomposing leaves and dead organisms are found. And the soil is softer, with many natural pores and cracks to explore. The roots slide into existing spaces between soil particles. They push aside grains of sand and tiny clumps of clay, but don't excavate huge volumes of soil like a drill would. So as the tree gets bigger, the carbon for the trunk and branches mostly comes from air. The roots primarily explore, anchor, and mine small amounts of nutrients and water from the soil. The soil shifts and compacts around them, like a very slow, thick fluid. This is one reason you don't see a deep pit under an old tree. The tree never removed a giant block of soil. It just threaded itself through it. But this threading isn't random. Roots are not just blind tubes. They're surprisingly sophisticated explorers. At the tip of every growing root is a tiny, delicate structure called the root cap. It looks humble, a small, blunt piece of tissue protecting the growing cells behind it. But functionally, it's more like a command center. Root caps are filled with sensors that tell the root where it is and where it should go. Some of the things roots can sense: gravity. Special cells contain tiny, dense particles that sink under gravity, letting the root know which way is down. This is how roots know to grow into the soil, even in complete darkness. Moisture. They can detect moisture gradients, differences in water content in the soil. If one direction is wetter, roots often curve toward it like slow-motion water seekers. Temperature. Small changes in temperature can influence how fast and in which directions roots grow, helping them avoid extreme hot or cold zones. Chemicals and nutrients. They smell, in a sense, dissolved nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and even chemicals released by other plants or microbes. Vibrations from water. Recent research suggests roots can detect subtle vibrations in the soil, including those made by moving water in pipes or channels, and adjust their growth toward it. All of this information combines into some sort of root decision-making system. Of course, roots don't think like animals. There is no brain underground. But the network of signals traveling through the plant, including electrical pulses and hormonal messages, allows roots to act like an exploring intelligence, choosing paths, slowing or speeding growth, branching where they find riches, retreating or slowing in hostile soil. So as a root grows, it doesn't just plow forward like a drill. It steers, it tests, it samples, and it changes course. And as it does, it doesn't just slide between rocks. It can also reshape the underground world. Roots may look fragile, but they're capable of incredible mechanical force. As new cells are produced near the root tip and then take in water, they inflate, pushing forward. This growth pressure can be like a network of tiny hydraulic jacks wedging their way into microscopic cracks in rock. Over years and decades, this pressure can help widen cracks, contributing to the slow breakdown of rock into soil. But roots are not just mechanical miners, they're chemical miners too. Around every active root tip, there's an invisible halo of chemical activity. Roots can release acids that dissolve minerals, making nutrients like phosphorus more available. Excrete enzymes that help break down complex organic matter, swap hydrogen ions for nutrient ions on soil particles, effectively prying nutrients loose. They're especially hungry for nitrogen, vital for proteins and DNA. Phosphorus, essential for ATP, the cell's energy currency. The finer roots also branch into root hairs, microscopic extensions that turn a smooth root into a shaggy, super-absorbent mop. Root hairs massively increase the surface area touching the soil. Without them, a tree would suck nutrients like a single straw. With them, it slurps with an entire brush of thin, flexible drinking straws. So, is this mining operation enough to feed a giant tree alone? Not really. To get the rarest nutrients, trees form an alliance with something even better at mining than they are, a partner that turns the soil into some sort of biological internet and marketplace.
Beneath every healthy forest, there is a second hidden world, a world of fungi. These aren't mushrooms yet. Mushrooms are just the fruiting bodies. The real fungus is made of tiny thread-like filaments called hyphae. When these filaments tangle together and spread, they form mycelium, the fungal body. Many trees form close partnerships with these fungi, known as mycorrhizae, literally fungus roots. Here's how the deal works. Tree roots provide the fungus with sugars, all that glucose created up in the leaf factories. Fungi, in return, provide the tree with water and nutrients that are hard to get otherwise. Why fungi? Because fungal threads are ridiculously good at exploring soil. A hypha can be thinner than a root hair, slipping into spaces roots can't reach. They can secrete powerful enzymes and acids to dissolve organic matter and minerals. They can transport nutrients along their threads like a living pipeline. In just 1 cubic meter of healthy forest soil, about the size of a washing machine, there can be hundreds of kilometers of fungal threads. Scale that up to an entire forest, and you get underground fungal networks that can stretch for kilometers. Many trees can be connected into the same fungal network, forming a kind of shared trade web. A tree pumps sugar to its fungal partners. Those fungi move phosphorus, nitrogen, and water back to the tree. In some cases, fungi may even transfer nutrients between different trees, acting as middlemen in a strange, silent economy. At the tips of tree roots where they meet the fungus, there are trade posts, complex interfaces where sugars and nutrients are swapped, carefully controlled so that neither partner gives too much or gets cheated. It's like every root tip runs a small border station where carbohydrates are exchanged for minerals. Scientists sometimes call this the wood wide web. This is a poetic metaphor, and like all metaphors, imperfect, but it captures something real. A hidden, interconnected network tying many trees and fungi together. And we are only beginning to understand how deep this goes. Which signals are passed through the network, how much resources are shared, hoarded, or traded, how stable these alliances are over time. What we know for sure, without this fungal alliance, trees would struggle to get enough phosphorus and other key nutrients. With it, they become far more effective underground miners, again, without needing to dig big holes. Let's return to our original question. Why doesn't a giant tree leave a big hole in the ground as it grows? Now we can connect the pieces. Most of the tree's mass comes from the air. The carbon in wood, bark, and leaves is captured from CO2 in the atmosphere. To get 1 ton of carbon, a tree must process around 6,000 tons of air, or about 5 million cubic meters of it. This process happens in the leaf factories, not by removing soil. Roots mainly occupy existing spaces in the soil. They thread through pores, cracks, and gaps between soil particles. They push and compact soil, but don't remove large chunks the way a tunnel machine would. Soil itself is somewhat like a slow, thick fluid on long timescales. It shifts, settles, and fills gaps. The underground empire is shallow and spread out. Most roots are in the top 25 centimeters of soil, forming a wide mat, not a deep shaft. This mat anchors the tree horizontally across a large area, like a giant living tent peg system. Roots and fungi mine nutrients very efficiently in tiny quantities. They use chemical tricks, acids, enzymes, instead of brute force excavation. They use a vast network of root hairs and fungal hyphae. In 1 cubic meter, there can be hundreds of kilometers of fungal threads.
This allows them to harvest nutrients without needing to scoop out massive volumes of soil. Decomposition constantly recycles material. Leaves, small roots, and even parts of the tree die and decompose, returning material back to the topsoil. As old, fine roots die, they leave tiny channels which can be reused by water, new roots, and fungi. The soil is constantly being rebuilt by life, not carved out like a mine. So a fully grown tree is not the end result of digging a gigantic invisible pit and replacing it with wood. It is more like a sunlight sculpture, built mostly from air, anchored to the earth by a shallow, intelligent root system, plugged into a vast, invisible fungal internet beneath your feet. It is quietly mining the sky and the soil at the same time, reshaping the world in slow motion. There is still so much we don't know about how these giants really work, but the more we learn, the stranger and more astonishing they become. This was EDUx Talks. If you'd like to keep exploring the hidden machinery of life, from the roots of trees to the edges of the atmosphere, consider subscribing and tell us in the comments, what other everyday mystery should we uncover next?